Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Brownfield Braintrust podcast, which I can barely say today. Um, this is about our 20th episode, and I'm extremely excited about what we're discussing today. It's a subject that's near and dear to my heart, but let's give a little background before we dive in. So, what will we be discussing today? There has been a significant reduction over the past few years in California environmental agency issuances of no further action letters, affectionately called NFAs. There's some other terms used as well. And today we're focusing on NFAs for sites that have released volatile organic compounds such as PCE, TCE, benzene, and sources such as dry cleaners, one of many. So this clampdown on NFAs is in large part due to Cali PA's supplemental guidance for screening and evaluating vapor intrusion, which has been evolving since 2019. The latest version is dated February 2023, and going back to the February 26, 24 Winefield and Associates vapor intrusion blog, we analyzed NFA counts between 2017 and 2023, and we noted a 55% reduction for all closures. And that's just not for VI sites. Um, Frankly, I haven't received any feedback until now for closed sites, VOC sites in 2024. And I will digress many times in the next 30 to 40 minutes. So here's a digression. As many of you know out there, Winefield and Associates buys brownfields. It buys contaminated sites that are blighted and not being put to beneficial use. So in order to consider closing the purchase of a brownfield site, we have to have some sort of endpoint in mind. So there's got to be a path to closure. It can't just because we have the option to acquire it. And in order to exercise that option, there has to be light at the end of the tunnel. And I can, in good faith, appeal to investor money for these transactions if I can't be convinced that this site can be closed and that it can be put to beneficial use. As such, I recently appealed to the California environmental community, consultants, environmental attorneys, contractors, and lo and behold, Citadel EHS was one of the very few respondents that had actually received an NFA for a site or sites with volatile organic compounds. So kudos to Citadel. And I've got with me uh, Greg McIver of Citadel, and I'll give a brief background on the firm and Greg, and then we'll have fun. So Citadel EHS is a market-leading environmental health, safety, and sustainability EH&S and EHS&S. It used to be just EH&S consulting firm helping organizations create safer, more sustainable spaces. Um, Greg McIver, who is with us today, hello, Greg, welcome,
Hello, Matt.
is a principal scientist and co-practice lead and is on the board of directors at Citadel EHS. Greg has more than 25 years of experience in the environmental consulting field with a broad range of project experience, including phase one and phase two assessments, legal support, remedial pilot studies, remedial action design and implementation, vapor mitigation, bioremediation. The list goes on and on. And so Greg knows what he's doing. He's assessed and remediated countless sites in California, and he has an example of a site that he recently received a no further action letter that had VOCs, and I'm just very excited to hear this because it means there's hope. So, Greg, would you like me to share a screen or?
Yeah, let's share a screen.
All righty. So let Greg please tell us about your path to closure for the site, and I'll listen
Yeah, so
intently.
so we actually, Matt, we're closing three sites in California this
Oh
year.
my goodness.
So I'm presenting on two, and I thought I would start with just kind of an overview of path to closure approach, because you kind of set the stage with how difficult it is with the regulatory environment in California to get closure. And my message, is regulatory buy-in, stakeholder buy-in is really the first and most critical step to getting site closure.
What do you mean by that? Because at the start, everyone's friendly. They're shaking hands. You meet the regulator. We say we all have a goal to bring this site to beneficial use. So
Yep.
what do you mean by that?
Well, if I look back at the sites I've closed, that is the theme. The regulator was a part of the entire investigation process.
Okay.
We develop a relationship. We talk about next steps, talk about data gaps, talk about, where they're actually kind of a part of the team when they're looking at the data and as we're moving forward. So you really got to kind of set that, like you stated, as a developer, you want to know how are we going to get to closure. You want to kind of develop that path with the regulator from the beginning. And then I put in here cost modeling because the client is also a stakeholder. And so you also need a client that's willing to pay for the work.
Mm.
And so you need to let them know, what is it going to cost? What are they looking at? Because not everybody can pay for these expensive investigation remediation projects. The use of the low threat closure tool, that's an old tool, 2009. I use that in the Bay Area. I also use that in the Central Valley, Central Coast. I don't reference it in my low threat closure request, but I use it in evaluating what do I need to do to get to closure. And then when we're making our case for closure, I use the checklist in the low threat closure tool to demonstrate that we've satisfied all of those.
I thought there was just a low threat closure tool for petroleum USTs. There's one for solvents as well.
Yeah, there's one in the San Francisco Bay Area for solvents,
Okay.
specifically the chlorinated solvents, and it's 2009. Um,
Noted.
so that's very important. And then data gap to closure, investigation, comprehensive conceptual site model. So you want to look at that low threat closure tool. You want to look at what are the requirements for closure, and you have to figure out what do I need to satisfy those requirements? What do I need to do to check those boxes? Source removal, delineation of, media. You've got issues with the sanitary sewer or other source areas. You want to figure that out early on. You don't want to move forward with remediation and leave something unchecked, and then have to restart the clock later on in the project. Uh,
Hmm.
that's that's really important. And then as you're doing that, as you're going through that investigation, you're keeping the goal of closure, like you're doing an impediment to closure characterization, and that way the regulatory agency's hearing it. They're part of it. It gives them a chance to say, well, actually, no, you need to do more. You need to step out here. I'm not going to agree to that, or it'll lay the foundation, for working towards closure. So I found that's really important. And these tools are there for you come in on a project at different times. You could be, doing the first investigation after a phase one or phase two during a property transaction, or you're coming in on a project that's already been characterized to some extent. Maybe they've done some remediation. So it's good to go back and look at it through that low threat closure lens, and develop your impediments to closure and how you're going to get there. You want to focus your remediation on satisfying those closure requirements. Like I said, the closure tool has boxes that you have to check. Source removal, groundwater quality will meet water quality objectives within a reasonable amount of time, and of course, protective of human health and indoor air. Like to use multiple lines of evidence, and obviously, most of these sites we can't get totally clean, so we're using a land use covenant, and we're using that low threat closure tool. So with that, I was going to go through a couple dry cleaner cases in California.
Oh, oh,
Uh,
goody. Let's do
yeah.
it.
So, and you'll see the theme of my first slide throughout these. So this is a dry cleaner case. It's in San Mateo County. Brian Gwynn was the regulator. It's a former dry cleaner site. Groundwater 310 of PCE max, and the final was 32.9. So we had some residual PC in groundwater, and soil vapor 1950, and then our final was 612. So again, we're closing the site. We're leaving some concentrations in groundwater and concentrations in soil vapor. Indoor air, our final indoor air was 1.03.
The screening level for indoor air for PCE is about 2, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah. So
S-
we're below the
Okay.
screening level. And we have multiple rounds of sampling to demonstrate that, it's consistently below the screening level.
And the screening level for PCE and soil vapor for industrial commercial, I think is 67. So you're leaving in place about 10 times that.
Correct.
That's impressive.
I thought so. This example, and the next one actually gave me hope because, you're with the vapor, we're in limbo of leaving concentrations of vapor over the screening level. And then how do we close the site? Will they close it without doing indoor air to verify that the slab continues to provide protection? And
I'm
here's,
sorry, there was indoor air before the closure letter, but no indoor air post closure. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, the point is there's no post-closure sampling required. There's
Ah,
no
okay.
ongoing indoor air sampling, needed. Here, remediation, we came in midway through this project. The sanitary sewer line and contaminated soil around the sewer was excavated. We came in and we did additional excavation outside the building along the sewer, the storm drain. And during that excavation, we injected some ZVI in the groundwater. So pretty limited, remediation. The concentrations weren't that high. Um, so that was the remedial approach. And really, then it came down to, can we demonstrate that, we're protective of human health for indoor air? Groundwater will meet water quality objectives within a reasonable amount of time. One of the things that Brian asked us to do to kind of help demonstrate that the slab was protective with indoor air was pressure differential measurements. And at the time, I hadn't done that before. So it was, there's a tool that you could use to measure the differential pressure beneath the slab to indoor air. And you can naturally have like a negative pressure in the sub-slab that
Hmm.
would, suggest that you're less likely to have an indoor air vapor issue, kind of like you would have with a sub-slab depressurization system. So we were able to demonstrate that through testing, and that helped um, support our case for closure, and that the slab was protective without a sub-slab depressurization system or continuous monitoring.
I don't really understand the pressure differential measurement tool. So if you have a pressure that's greater above the subslab than below the subslab, you're protective. Is that what it's saying?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Here we had to, delineate vapor, show that surrounding residential properties, were not impacted, which we were able to do. There was a dewatering system downgradient of the site, part of another development project for a below grade parking structure. We had to show
Mm.
that wasn't pulling the plume in that direction. The remediation cost, we didn't spend 800K on our portion of the work, but I'm estimating that's probably in the ballpark of what was spent. Um, and San Mateo County, Brian Gwynn, he was a partner throughout the process. And they're willing to close sites if you've got a client and a consultant, that's willing to cooperate and move it towards closure. So
So
the
there was no vapor extraction.
No vapor extraction, right? Yeah. In the end, it wasn't needed because I'll get to a figure. Yeah, it's groundwater. Yeah, so you can kind of see here the blue line is the historical excavation area, and then this was another excavation area. So we were able to remove the source, um, and this was done quite a while ago. This was probably 15 years
Mm.
prior to us taking over the site. And I think that allowed, prevented the contamination from really impacting groundwater significantly. And then it gave time for vapor to attenuate or over time underneath the building.
So I'm looking at the screen and it appears that we've got concentrations in soil gas, micrograms per cubic meter,
Correct.
PCE of 558, 612, 266, 185, 254, 16.3, 170. So these
Correct.
numbers are in the low to mid hundreds consistently. Um, so which isn't too bad.
Not too bad. Yeah. Um, Yeah, and then the groundwater, I'll show the map, but it's kind of consistent. I guess one thing that we did, I'll say, is we evaluated TDS to
Hmm.
help demonstrate that it's not really a potential drinking water because TDS is naturally occurring over the screening level. So that kind of helped take a little edge off of residual PCE and groundwater. And so you can see we had 33.9 in our last sampling event at MW4. So that would be the highest concentration. And the ZVI in this area seemed to work well with MW2 and got us down to non-detect.
What is ZVI again? I know it's an
Zero
oxygenate
valent,
of some sort.
yeah, zero valent iron, and it
Okay,
creates an anaerobic environment similar to what you would do with a EISB injection event to promote bioremediation of PCE.
thank you.
Yeah. Now this I took out of our request for closure, and why I think it's important because it kind of ties into like the ongoing dialogue with the county and the regulator. We had a meeting with Brian July 1. We identified, we asked the question, what do we need to do to close the site? Here's this, and this. And through that process, we identified three things, and that guided us for our next step of investigation at the site. And we went out, we characterized, and we satisfied his concerns and the data gaps in terms of groundwater, in terms of soil vapor, and indoor air. So having that communication, what do we need to do to get to closure? Answering those questions, and hopefully the data supports, the desired outcome. And
It sounds like the regulator was very specific and gave you these three main points to reach for. Whereas when I work with some other regulators, they say, well, you just have to submit multiple lines of evidence to show that you've closed the site.
that's
So
that's
that is a huge difference of clarification at the outset, as you suggested earlier.
right. Yeah. So, and Brian, you need to show multiple lines of evidence. That is a theme. But, you don't wait till the end to ask, right? You're talking to them throughout the process. You're working on it together. So I think this is a good example, and just, trying to beat that through that you need regulatory buy-in. Um, and so you asked for a closure letter. This is what they look like.
It's been a while.
Yeah. So, thank you for your cooperation throughout this investigation. And, thank you, Brian, for your cooperation. And so, yeah, no further action. And, with the San Mateo County, I think, they're definitely willing to push sites to closure and make the case for closure, which has to get approved by the water board,
Hmm.
in which it was.
Now, I see there's a land use covenant, so this is a strip mall and it's going to have to remain commercial given the concentrations we just discussed.
Correct. Yeah. And I mean, when you close the sites with the vapor concentrations that are over the ESLs, there's an ongoing potential risk to indoor air. So part of it's also like, hey, if you're going to cut a hole in the and change the conditions, cut a hole in the slab, right? Um, that may trigger, notification to the county or the water board or the oversight agency.
So it's currently November 18th, 2025. This was issued October 1, 2025. That is hot off the presses.
Hot off the presses. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Very wonderful. Um,
Do you want to show us the second one too?
yeah, I
Oh,
mean, I have another one. Yeah, we'll
we
go
have
through.
time.
I don't know. I mean, I have time. I don't know how long you want this to be. I go quick. This one was a little more juicy. Dry cleaner, Central Valley Water Board, max PC and groundwater 8,000, final 88.3. They wouldn't tell us a threshold, like trying to get below 100. But I kind of think being below 100 is a number you want to shoot for, along with multiple lines of evidence showing that it will trend towards water quality objectives.
And drinking water PCE is 5 micrograms
Five.
per liter. Okay.
Yeah.
Heck, my memory's working today.
Yeah. Soil vapor sub slab 900,000
That's pretty juicy.
down to 177. Indoor air
Okay.
below the ESLs.
Okay.
Here we did vapor extraction, injections. There was also groundwater pump and treat. There's actually two dry cleaners associated with this site. We got closure on one of them. I won't
Mm-hmm.
closing the other. Um,
Sorry, what about closing the other?
we're working towards
Oh,
closing the other one. I hope to
I
close that one next year.
I see.
Yeah. So again, similar theme, we're leaving residual PC in groundwater. We're leaving residual PC in soil vapor subslab above the ESLs. Um, but through regulatory buy-in, great remediation. The client put a lot of effort and money on this one into remediation. Um, and we're able to close the site.
So this is actually directly from the water board, Central Valley.
Yep. And this is even
Uh,
hotter off the presses because right now I have an email saying you're getting a closure letter. So I'll show that to you. This one was cool. We took over the site. Another consultant actually did the remediation. They ran the SVE. They did the ISCO injections. We came in and we're like, how do we get this to closure? And
mm-hmm.
yep. And I evaluated it like, let's shut down the SVE system, both SVE systems, because they're not removing mass. And let's do a vapor assessment and indoor air assessment to check that box. We shut down the groundwater pump and treat because groundwater concentrations were low, and we thought low enough to support closure. So that was a big win, just shutting down all of those active remediation systems and then transitioning the site to let's close this thing. What do we need? What do we need to do to get there? Um,
So groundwater pump and treat, can you describe the system a little more?
yeah, I mean it was pretty robust. Let me pull up a figure. So there was two dry cleaners, like I said. The groundwater pump and treat was focused on this area. This is the site that hasn't been closed yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up when I started in the industry managing a large groundwater pump and treat system at Fort Ord. And then I've worked to shut down as many groundwater pump and treat systems as I possibly
Hmm.
can since then.
So
Uh,
it's a total fluids bring down total fluid system? Is it just acting as a hydraulic barrier? What is it
yeah,
doing?
no, it was designed. I mean, there's not like a sensitive receptor that it was trying to protect. It was more just mass removal,
Okay.
contaminant treatment. So they were running that. They also did an injection event over here. But again, shutting down the treatment systems, reducing cost, doing things that are needed for site closure. That was my focus.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So um, here you'll see this is their injection locations along the sewer, the former dry cleaning area. Um, and these are the groundwater concentrations at closure. So MW1, we had 88, and that's what we're leaving in place. And we're able to demonstrate a decreasing trend. And through the injection, all these other wells were below 5. And so we use that as another line of evidence, like, the injections worked, all the other wells are below 5. MW1 is going to get there as well. We cut the head off the snake, and the rest of the body is going to die.
Yeah, it's only had one well out of the one, two, three, four, eight that had PCE above the drinking water standard of 5 micrograms per liter. So that's pretty impressive.
Right. But, and I'm also appreciative that we're able to close it, leaving the 88,
Hmm.
because I wasn't sure.
Is
So
there any
yeah,
post remediation closure monitoring that they're going to request?
yeah, so for that well that we were just looking at, you can kind of see we did a concentrations over time with a trend chart to show, concentrations are decreasing, and we can project out, it'll hit MCL around 2030. The ask from the water board was, hey, you need to trend this post the most recent injection. Um, and so because we had a little spike here, but then it came back down, and and with the data of the surrounding wells, they were able to get comfortable with, through diffusion, dilution, time, concentrations in MW1 are going to get towards water quality objectives as well.
How long for each of these two sites did it take to get to closure? For the $800,000 one, how long was that process?
Well, that took a little while. Again, he started that work before we came onto the project. I think I started that project for probably about 6.5 years. And you're battling clients' ability to pay, willingness to move forward with work, with the schedule. So I'd say that was about 6 years.
Your time and the previous consultant?
That was my time. Yeah, there
Okay.
was there was the excavation that happened like 15 years before, and not a lot of work had been done, um, more recently before we took that project over.
So for the $800,000 one, the project itself took about 20 years, but it wasn't continuous effort.
No, no,
But it still was a 20 years from soup to nuts.
it was. Yeah, and if you look at this one, MW1 started monitoring, back in 2009.
Okay.
We took over this project. I think it's maybe been about a year and a half of us being the consultant, shutting down the systems, doing the data gap to closure investigation, um, and negotiating site closure.
Well, these are incredible data points. I'll share a little anecdote of what happens when I want to buy strip malls.
Okay.
So I'll get a call from a broker that says, we've had this site on the market for a year. We had a buyer, they went in escrow, they did a phase two, they found PCE that exceeded the screening levels significantly in soil vapor. We don't know if groundwater is contaminated. What do you pay? What will you pay for it? And
Right.
so they'll say something to the effect of, well, you're just gonna dig it out and it may cost you about 100,000, right? And so are you gonna take $100,000 off the purchase price? And so these are the conversations I have all the time.
Right.
And it's if I went to that broker and said, well, the least amount you're going to pay is 800,000 over 20, and if you really hurry, maybe you can get it done in 5 years, although it took this site 20. Um, and then on the more expensive side, you're looking at 6 million bucks. They, you could tell that they're doing everything in their power not to hang up the phone on me.
Right.
And
Right.
so these are very daunting numbers. Not many property owners, especially in the dry cleaning realm, can support this kind of revenue, these kinds of revenues.
Oh, correct. Yeah. And we try to support with SCAP grants. And with the stakeholder buy-in, the property owner has a seat at the table, and that property owner could be a developer with deep pockets, or it could be, somebody who's retired who doesn't have the funds. And it's important for them to voice that and make sure that the work that we're doing is cost efficient, with the understanding they don't have the money for um, extensive investigation remediation. We want to focus those funds on meaningful efforts. So that
Absolutely.
all goes into it. And yeah, we support those efforts, those transactions through cost modeling to closure. And we'll do the optimistic, pessimistic, expected price modeling. And the more data you have, the more accurate that is. And if you haven't characterized groundwater, well, that's a big data gap. There's going to be a big risk premium on the total cost of closure for a project like that. So if you're selling a property, it behooves you to do the characterization to the point where you can kind of shorten the window of the risk and even maybe get to an improved remedial action plan that you can then put a number on what it's going to take to implement. Um, because otherwise there's a lot of unknowns, and the risk premium gets too high and nobody's happy.
Speaking of premiums, I'm going to ask you a question out of left field. Are Have you heard any insurance companies providing cost cap insurance for projects like this? And for those listeners who aren't familiar with cost cap environmental insurance, say you have an estimated cleanup cost of 1 million. You used to be able to buy a policy that says, well, if it goes over 1.5, the environmental carrier, will cover it. Any of
Yes.
those tools available these days that
Those
you've?
tools are available. And I'll just mention Don Moore's name.
Mhm.
Somebody can, reach out to me. Don can help with that and has a contact. I met somebody. I haven't actually needed it on a project recently. So I do have a name in my Rolodex, but I
He's
don't.
an environmental insurance broker, Mr. Moore.
Yeah, well, Don's a little bit of both. He's a geologist. He's a client manager, and he's got a history working as an environmental insurance broker. So he's got the whole package.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So you gave me an interesting anecdote, but well, I'll let you proceed. I see you've got another slide.
Yeah, I don't need to, it's more of the same here on, this is path to closure or arguments, the words that we used. I think it's very similar. I could kind of get, cut to the chase, but here's the letter for the site in Sacramento from the water board. Again, October 16th. So fresh off the press.
1 month.
Um, and yeah, no, so it's these letters are great. It's a point of celebration. I like to put these on my wall. All the sites that you work to closure, you really remember. And it gives you confidence as you're taking on another project, right? And you're developing those cost to closure models because you can say, hey, I've done this. My numbers are meaningful,
Hmm.
you trust my numbers. Um,
I like your major lessons here. Please
yeah.
expound on them for those listening, not watching.
Yeah. So you asked for major lessons, and I think the secret to success again is the stakeholder buy-in, and that's the client and that's the regulator. And so hopefully you have a good regulator, that's willing to work with you. And when you start getting close to closure, you want to make sure that their supervisor's involved and maybe their supervisor's supervisor,
Hmm.
to make sure that everybody up the ladder is on board with the direction that we're going. If we do these next steps, they answer these questions, the water board, the agency, would move forward with closure. You really got to use that low threat closure guidance.
And
It's
again, that's in what is the source of that? You said it was a Bay Area Water Board?
Yeah, just Google low threat closure guidance 2009 San Francisco Bay Water Board,
Okay.
and it's
Is
the
that honored as among some of the other water boards?
it's not honored.
Okay.
And so so going for closure for the site in Sacramento, I didn't reference it, but I used it throughout. They knew what I was doing. They knew the framework that I was presenting the closure and the argument. But it's not I can't reference it for them, but it gives them something to review and check the boxes because the Central Valley Water Board doesn't have a low threat closure guidance. They're working on it, but there is not one currently.
I know there have been some efforts to put one together statewide using the low threat closure criteria from the UST for
UST.
USTs as a guidance. But so that's it's good to know that there's something that exists for
Yeah.
uh
Yeah.
I'm sorry, was that for dry cleaners or chlorinated solvents?
Specific to chlorinated solvents.
Okay, not specific to dry cleaners. I know some folks are trying to do it for dry cleaners. You know,
Well, no, I mean, chlorinated solvents is dry cleaners, right?
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sorry. I'm talking too quickly.
yeah.
Um,
Okay.
what I understood some folks had been trying to do on a parallel path with the screening guidance is put together a guidance document for dry cleaner closures.
Correct.
So it's a more narrow focus than just chlorinated solvents.
Okay.
And they're thinking, let's model it after what was done for service stations, because there's a very effective low
Correct.
threat closure policy for USTs. So that's good to know. Another lesson I learned today is, boy, are the ranges immense for what the remediation can cost at a dry cleaner. I've always known it. I've seen
Right.
it. But just this brief set of examples, 800,000 and 6 million is a huge gap.
Well, keep in mind the 6 million was for two dry cleaners,
Okay.
right? And there was injections, two soil vapor extraction systems running, and a groundwater pump and treat. And so today, I don't think anybody would be installing a groundwater pump and treat system. So I think, if you cut it in half, 3 million per site, knock off the groundwater pump and treat, which I'm sure was,
Well, wasn't that necessary to expose some of the saturated zone to the
I don't think so.
chemicals?
No,
Okay.
no, yeah. I mean, I think you can get at it through injections, which
Okay.
is what most people would probably propose these days. Um, I know I wouldn't, unless it was absolutely required where you had a well that was going to be impacted and you needed to capture the plume before it got to the well.
Fair enough.
Uh,
Well, uh, as we wind down, would you please tell us a little more about Citadel and how folks can contact you to get more details on these closures and similar ones?
sure, yeah. So, Citadel, we're a team of geologists, engineers, scientists, toxicologists, and we like doing great work with great people for good clients. And I think that's kind of the secret to our success. We're a team, I've got a toxicologist that is critical for these discussions. I've got vapor engineers. We didn't talk about that, but we'll do vapor barriers, we'll do subslab depressurization systems, SVE systems. Um, and yeah, I mean, you need the geologist too to understand the geology and the contaminant pathways. So you really need the team, and I think that's our strength is our team, um, and our desire to close sites. I think
Well,
not
it's
everybody
obviously, oh,
not
sorry to
everybody
interrupt.
has that push, right? Like that's how I approach it. And so my model is like, when you close a site, it's, well, what are you going to do? You don't have any more work. But when you close sites, you get more work. You get more work by doing great work. And
So how can folks reach out to you?
yeah, so there's my phone number, 530-592-7755, or G McIver at citadelehs.com.
Fantastic. This has been enlightening, a lot of detail on how to get to the final closure path, and I'm excited about buying some more sites in response to this because I was feeling a little down this year, but you're making me
Yeah.
feel better. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. And appreciate it.
We'll be talking to you later.
Okay.
Bye,
Thanks.
everyone.